Hello, everyone. My name is Jee Park. I'm the Executive Director of Innocence Project New Orleans. Thank you for joining us for this very important conversation with the candidates running for the Orleans Parish District Attorney. According to the most recent report from the National Registry of Exonerations in September, Orleans Parish has the highest per capita exoneration rate of any county in the country. In 78% of exonerations from New Orleans, there was official misconduct. And in fact, prosecutors committed misconduct in 90% of those cases. In the last 4 decades, concealing exculpatory evidence by the police and prosecutors in New Orleans unfortunately became routine. With incumbent District Attorney Leon Canizero not running for re-election, we have these candidates vying for this seat. We will hear from each of these candidates today and hear about their plans to prevent wrongful convictions, to correct past misconduct and wrongs, and to exonerate the innocent. Before we get started, I must clarify that this conversation is being sponsored by the Innocence Network and Innocence Project New Orleans to inform the public about the candidates' views and policies and issues that are very much of importance and concern to our clients and to our communities. IPNO is an independent 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization, and neither the Innocence Network nor any of the nonprofit organizations that are part of the network support, oppose, or endorse any candidates for elected office. So, okay, now that that's out of the way, moderating with this conversation with me this afternoon is Glenn Davis. Glenn was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned for 13 years, 9 months, and 3 days for a murder that he did not commit. He and his 2 co-defendants were convicted in Jefferson Parish. It is a parish right next to Orleans Parish. Glenn was exonerated in 2010 when Innocence Project New Orleans uncovered evidence that had not been disclosed to his trial counsel. Evidence about an alternative suspect and how the state's primary eyewitness was nowhere near the murder and could not have actually witnessed the murder at all. Glenn's co-defendants, Terrence Myers and Mary Dalmore, were also exonerated. Hi, Glenn.
Hi, G. Hi, everyone. Thank you. I was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned for nearly 14 years. I was just 18 years old when I was falsely accused of a murder that I didn't commit. But since winning back my freedom, I've become a homeowner and a small business owner. And I now will briefly introduce each of the 4 candidates. First, we have Judge Arthur Hunter, a former judge of Orleans Parish Criminal District Court. He was elected to the court in 1996 and resigned to run for district attorney this year. He began his legal career as a staff attorney with the civil sheriff for Orleans Parish, then established a private law office focusing on civil and criminal matters. Prior to law school, he worked as a police officer for the New Orleans Police Department. Next, we have Judge Keva Landrum, a former judge of Orleans Parish Criminal District Court. She began her legal career in the Orleans Parish District Attorney's Office and was the acting district attorney in 2007 before she was elected to serve as a judge in the Criminal District Court from 2008 to 2020. Next, we have Judge Maurice Reed. He was a judge on the Orleans Parish Criminal District Court from 1992 to 1996. He was also a police officer for the New Orleans Police Department and an assistant U.S. attorney, a special prosecutor with the Orleans District Attorney's Office, and a plaintiff's attorney in civil matters. And finally, we have City Councilman Jason Williams, who is currently the New Orleans City Council president and has also been a member of City Council since 2014. He began his legal career as a criminal defense attorney and has represented hundreds of clients in criminal, civil, state, and federal courts. He also has been appointed to serve as judge ad hoc by the Louisiana Supreme Court and the Criminal District Court. I welcome you guys, and I thank you for joining us today.
So all of our questions today will be asked by IPNO clients who are freed or exonerated for a crime they did not commit or a member of their family. Each of the candidates who are with us today will all have 1 minute each to answer the questions. We'll switch up the order of who answers first, middle, and second, and third to keep our conversation moving and interesting. Now, our first question comes from George Toka.
My name is George Toka. I spent over 30 years in Angola for a crime I didn't commit. My question is, a disproportionate number of exonerees across the country are black men. This is also true in New Orleans. All but one of the men wrongfully convicted in New Orleans is black. Why do you think wrongful convictions disproportionately happen to black men?
First of all, we'll start with Judge Arthur Hunter.
Hey, good evening. How y'all doing? Good. Yeah, well, George, let me tell you, when I was a judge, in 2007, you had a lot of undocumented immigrants here. And I found that the NOPD was profiling undocumented immigrants. And just recently, I found that the NOPD was racially profiling African-American males in the French Quarter. And as a result, those officers were investigated. They're on investigation. The unit was disbanded. And so I'm truly aware of the racism and of the racial profiling within the criminal justice system. And even though I was a former police officer, that would not stop me from doing the right thing.
Next, we Judge.
Thank you and good afternoon. And, let me say this. I knew Taco. I'd met him once or twice, and I know members of his family. So I understand how important it is and how devastating it is when people are wrongfully convicted and spend not even time, but one moment in jail. But what I'll tell you is this, our police department, the way in which we police certain neighborhoods and over-police certain neighborhoods has led to the over-incarceration or wrongful conviction of Black men. And that is a fact, and that is something that has to change. And as our next district attorney, I vow to work with the police department so that we can make sure that we are not, they are not, over policing certain neighborhoods, but more importantly, that everything that we do has fairness and justice instilled in it. And the way we screen cases, we can no longer accept cases that are built on misconduct or built on information that is not correct. And we have to reject that. And I stand to do that as our next district attorney.
City Councilman Williams.
Thank you for the question, George. I know George's story all too well. I worked on his case pro bono, and he was arrested when he was 17 years old. And the one thing that I would say, and the one thing that doesn't come up in these conversations, is that our criminal legal system is racist to its core from inception. And if we don't have DAs and police chiefs who are working to re-engineer and redesign the system to get to fight that implicit racial bias, we will never be able to turn this corner. And if there aren't systems in place that hold prosecutors accountable when they withhold evidence to win at all costs. Jee mentioned Harry Connick and how despicable those policies and protocols were. Truth of the matter is, it didn't happen by accident. It wasn't just a matter of negligence. It was by design, and it was taught in that office. Rest in power, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a pretty wonderful and salient quote in John Thompson's case, in which she said that it was inherent from top to bottom, from new DAs to the district attorney's office. And that implicit racial bias will always lead to inequitable results. And that is why we have to call it out so that we can then work to redesign it.
Okay.
My name is Marie Hill, and my son Darren Hill was exonerated in 2012. Eyewitness misidentification is one of the leading causes of wrongful convictions. My son was misidentified by 2 witnesses, and it took 20 years for DNA evidence to clear him. How will you screen and prosecute cases relying on eyewitness identification to ensure there are not more wrongful convictions?
Jee, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself, then I'll bring you on screen right now.
Thank you so much for that wonderful question, Ms. Marie Hill. We'll reverse the order and start with Jason Williams this time.
Thank you, Jee. You know, I think when you talk about eyewitness testimony, we have to be honest about just how problematic eyewitness testimony is. Single eyewitness testimony is even more problematic. Scientific and sociological studies have shown just how unreliable they are. The problem is most veteran and career prosecutors and most police officers believe it's the best evidence in the world, so they ignore all of the other forensic evidence that can be captured and used. It's important to say that just recently, Orleans Parish stopped being one of the few parishes that was actually throwing away DNA kits and not saving and preserving it so that could be tested. And one of the things that's important is that we have a DA that will retrain and retool homicide detectives and rape investigators on how to build better, stronger cases that do not have to rely on witness identification, because it is fundamentally flawed. When you look at the numbers of people who just go through certain studies and they're asked to identify someone, they would not tell the difference between me and Calvin Duncan day in and day out. And I could have just as easily been caught up. So we have to, when I say redesign the system, we have to reprioritize what we think good and bad evidence is. I believe that eyewitness testimony is fundamentally flawed, and we have to recognize that. It's not saying anything bad about the witness. It is just saying it is unreliable, and we have to redesign a system that buttresses good cases on better evidence, DNA, fingerprint, and we have cameras all over now, which is so much better than our own mental cameras.
Thank you, Jason. We'll next hear from Ms. Keva Landrum.
Thank you. And the way in which the police identify and solve these cases is going to be critical as a district attorney. We are going to have a robust screening division that looks to the case and looks to all of the evidence and not just any single piece of evidence to make a case. And so it's going to be important to make sure that these cases and the evidence is corroborated by the other facts, by what the witnesses tell us. And so that we can stop that circle that we know has occurred in the past. What I can say is this: I have been a former prosecutor. I have never been in any way disciplined for my cases. I have always believed in open file discovery, making sure that we turn over everything, even exculpatory evidence at the very beginning, but as that becomes available in any case. And it is going to be important to train our assistants to make sure that they understand that that is the standard under which we are going to operate. We have to have a system that is filled with transparency and integrity so that we can build a trust with New Orleans, and so that these cases are fair and the convictions are fair.
Thank you. And we'll finally hear from Arthur Hunter.
Hey, thanks. Let me say, it's a good thing now that the NOPD is now using, double-blind lineup procedure. And on sole eyewitness identification, I believe we need to also have and use corroborating evidence as well. But let me say this: a couple of years ago, I issued a decision in which expert testimony should be used in eyewitness identification cases. And Jee Park was the attorney in that case. But even though I was reversed by the Supreme Court, the legislature, through Senator Jimmy Harris, finally passed a legislation which now we can use expert testimony in eyewitness cases. And I will have no objection to the defense attorney, or even myself as a district attorney, having an expert to testify in a case involving eyewitness identification. But again, the number one issue should be to have more corroborating evidence other than just having a sole eyewitness giving testimony in a case.
Thank you, Judge Hunter. Our third question, Gregory Bright.
My name is Gregory Bright, and I have spent 27 and a half years in Angola for a murder I didn't commit. And my question is, do you think that the Orleans Parish District Attorney's Office has consistently handled Brady allegations in an appropriate manner? And if not, what needs to be changed?
Thank you, Greg. Okay, we'll mix the order up again and first we'll hear from Judge Landrum.
What I can say is this: any case in which someone has been wrongfully convicted is one case too many. And so the fact of the matter is this: as our next district attorney, I am going to operate an office that is based on fairness, integrity, and transparency. And that means that we are going to utilize open file discovery. And in major cases, that means also sitting down with the police department, defense attorneys, and our prosecutors, and going through not only a DA file, but the police department's file. It is important that we make sure that any and every piece of evidence is turned over, and not just Brady material, all discovery. And so the fact of the matter is this: as a judge, I may be, and I think probably one of the only judges that demanded that discovery be turned over at arraignment. I know that it is important for people to have the evidence that is being used against them and even for them. And so that is something that as a district attorney's office, I am going to ensure. You know, the leadership starts from the top. And again, I have never in my career been admonished in any way for failure to turn over Brady evidence in any case that I've handled. And I will make sure that my prosecutors are trained the same way.
Thank you, Judge Landrum. We'll now hear from City Councilman Jason Williams.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Glenn. I've heard one of my opponents, Keva Landrum, say that she has never been disciplined and never been admonished, and that is part of the problem. Prosecutors don't get held accountable. They've never been held accountable in the city of New Orleans. No one was held accountable when a memo was withheld from Robert Jones to keep him in jail even longer, even though it was clear he was innocent of the crime. I worked on Greg Bright's case. I remember that there was only a single eyewitness, and there was Brady evidence withheld there. And it's not enough that it comes out at some point. There must be protocols to teach young lawyers why open file discovery is important. And that is why when I create my conviction integrity unit, the folks that run that unit will also train line prosecutors on the importance of turning over all evidence, whether they see it as Brady evidence or not, whether it involves inconsistent statements, whether it involves impeachment evidence. And it is important that we as the leadership in the DA's office hold your prosecutors accountable, turn them over to the Bar Association, fire them when they cheat, because that's what it is, cheating.
Thank you, Jim. Next, we'll hear from Judge Arthur Hunter.
Thanks. Look, the answer is simple. It's yes. There have been Brady issues and Brady violations in the district attorney's office. Look, I had a case involving a district attorney, assistant district attorney, who was trying a case. I sentenced him to jail in contempt of court for tampering with evidence. And what we need to do is make sure that we teach our assistant district attorneys, our young prosecutors, the knowledge of the law, ethical responsibilities, and living up to their professional duties as well. Look, it's simple. If we want to be fair, if we want to have integrity in the system, we have to. It starts with the district attorney's office. That's where it starts. And I'll even during the screening process, if I have any information, any evidence, any police report, I'll turn it over to the defense attorney during the screening process, because it's not going to be just about convicting people. It's going to be about making sure we seek the truth and making sure we also are fair as well.
Thank you, Judge. Our next question comes from Jerome Morgan.
Hi, my name is Jerome Morgan, and this is my 7-month-old daughter, Justice. I was incarcerated for 20 years on a mandatory life sentence for a crime I did not commit. My question is, the Orleans Parish District Attorney's Office has been described as having a win-at-all-cost culture. It has used training materials that describe people who are charged with crimes as dirtbags and recanting witnesses as traitors. In my very own case, the DA's office even tried to send a crime victim to prison because he had recanted his testimony and admitted to being coerced. Do you think Orleans Parish District Attorney's culture has contributed to New Orleans' high rate of wrongful convictions? And if so, how will you try and change it? Thank you.
Thank you, Jerome, and we love your daughter, Justice. We'll start with Judge Arthur Hunter with this question.
Yes, and I love his daughter too, Justice. There is a culture within that office, and the culture is to win at all costs. And again, you know, I'm not going to be interested in how many convictions I have. My goal and my mission is going to be to make sure we seek the truth. And for that to happen, I'm going to make sure that the police department, those investigators, include all information, not just information allegedly pointing towards someone's guilt, but also information pointing to someone's innocence as well, and in the mitigation also. And so that's where the fairness is going to come in. That's where the integrity is going to come in. And that's the only way we're going to establish trust in the community.
We will next go to Jason Williams.
I am the only criminal defense attorney who is running for DA. I'm the only person who has stood next to someone facing a life sentence or the death penalty for a crime they didn't commit and help fight them through that and send them home. And so I understand how important it is to change the culture from top to bottom. And it's not just on the big cases. It starts with how we treat human beings on low-level misdemeanor cases as well. How you treat people large scale and small scale. And it also requires that we engage in rigorous and regular implicit bias training with screeners, with the line DAs, and with the leadership in the office. It is going to be very, very difficult to turn a ship that has actually taught its lawyers to win at all costs, to hide evidence. And so it's going to be a number of people who are going to have to leave that office. There's going to have to be a lot of work in our law schools to bring new talented people in who want to learn how to do it the right way. And I'm committed to doing that and reversing all perverse incentives that have been set up since Harry County.
And we'll finally hear from Ms. Keva Landrum.
And so what I'll say is this: yes, the office has to be held accountable and the culture of the office has to change. And when the councilman talks about being held accountable and held accountable for our actions, that starts from the very top. It comes from the leader. And so if you have a leader who's not willing to stand up and be held accountable for their actions, then everyone under the leader will not be able to do that as well. What I'll tell you is this: that the culture of the office, from winning convictions and long sentences, has to change. And under my administration, it will change, because it will be an eye toward justice and an eye toward public safety, ensuring that we do what is fair, right, and transparent by our New Orleans community and for everyone involved. This means changing how the community views the district attorney's office from being one of punishment to one of support. And that means supporting victims and their families who have been affected by crime, but also being a support system for our police and for anyone accused, so that if it is incorrect, we will not go forward. And that is just that simple.
Thank you, Judge Landrum. Our next question comes from Don DeGroot.
My name is Donald DeGrew. I was wrongly incarcerated for over 15 years. My question about conviction integrity unit. My own case was accepted for a review by Mr. Carrazero office, conviction integrity unit. But even though evidence showed I was innocent, all I was offered was a chance to plead guilty in order to come home. Can you identify the best practice that you intend to implement when establishing a CIU?
Thank you, Don. We'll first hear from Judge Arthur Hunter.
Thanks. Look, I was the first candidate to state that I would establish a conviction integrity unit. And that conviction integrity unit would be employed by or staffed by lawyers who have never worked for the district attorney's office. But that's dealing with it on the back end. This is what I want to do deal with it on the front end. You know, before a police officer submits an arrest warrant for signature by a judge, I'm going to have an ADA available 24/7, 365 to make sure that the information in that warrant supports the charge. And if it doesn't, I'm not going to accept the case. And that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, I want to make sure we have the right person who committed the crime rather than any person who could be wrongfully convicted. Also, we now have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to convince 12 people, not 10 out of 12, but 12 people. And third, it's going to have a collateral consequence with the NOPD because now they know they're going to have investigations that are truthful, that are accurate and complete and constitutional. And that will prevent those wrongful convictions on the front end.
Thank you, Judge Hunter. Next, we'll hear from Judge Keva Landrum.
Thank you. As our next district attorney, it is going to be my goal to make sure that we operate a fair, transparent office. And that means by instituting this conviction review unit. And that unit is going to be charged with making sure that prosecutions and convictions have integrity. And it's simply that, so that we can build a relationship of trust with our New Orleans community. And so when reviewing these cases, if in fact the evidence is not there to sustain a conviction with integrity, and it is not there to say that the case was met beyond a reasonable doubt, then it is not about negotiating the case. That is simply about dismissing it. You know, we cannot continue to try and plea bargain our way through things or try to negotiate our way through things. If the evidence is not there and the case cannot be proven, then we simply cannot move forward on that prosecution. And it's just that simple.
Okay, next we'll hear from City Councilman Jason Williams.
I will be committed to, number one, vigorously investigating claims of innocence, exonerating innocent people, admitting your mistakes or the mistakes of the past DA, and apologizing. And I believe that will send a message, a powerful message to the public that now the DA's office, for once in the city's history, can be trusted. And this is critical for public safety. This isn't just a feel-good measure. It is morally reprehensible and wrong to have an innocent person sitting in jail, and it means the person who actually committed the crime is still out there. I will re-interview witnesses. I will consult with experts, use the most up-to-date science and technology to re-evaluate all of the evidence, and I will test any evidence that exists. Furthermore, I will make sure that the lawyers that work in the specialized unit train all new ADAs on all the kinds of errors that most commonly lead to wrongful convictions. So while we look backwards, we're making sure that we don't make any more mistakes going forwards.
Thank you, Jason. Our next question is from Earl Truvia.
Good afternoon. My name is Earl Truvia, and I was in prison for 27 and a half years for a murder I did not commit. In Louisiana, wrongfully convicted innocent individuals are entitled to compensation. Currently, it is $25,000 per year, up to 10 years of wrongful imprisonment. That means that I don't get a penny for the 17 and a half years that I spent in Angola. Louisiana spent tens of thousands of dollars a year to lock me up, but won't compensate me for every year that was taken from me. Number one, what do you think the role of the district attorney in helping exonerates rebuild their lives? Number two, what should be the role of the district attorney? Thank you.
We will start this answer with Judge Keva Landrum.
Thank you. I think at the very first part of this, the role of the district attorney is to make sure and ensure we don't have wrongful convictions. That is the very first role of the district attorney, to ensure that every prosecution is met with fairness and transparency, is done correctly. There is no amount of money that could ever repay not one day that Mr. Truvia or anyone else spent incarcerated wrongfully. And so, it is a shame. And so the fact is, we need a district attorney like myself that is going to step up and make sure that we do not have these situations going forward. Someone that understands the system, someone that understands the burden of a prosecutor and understands the fairness and transparency and how justice is supposed to be met. And so that is what it is. The role of the DA is to be that person at the very beginning as the gatekeeper, to ensure that these things do not happen to another citizen in our city or our state again.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge. We will next hear from Councilman Jason Williams.
I don't think it's enough for your next DA to just have an eye towards justice. I believe the next DA has to have both eyes singularly fixed on fighting out all of the bias, unfairness, and cheating that has existed for so very long. The role of the DA has to be to keep a list of all system bad actors, whether they be police, whether they be prosecutors, whether they be current, whether they be past, because if we can show or if it's shown that a system actor led to one bad conviction, we need to be proactive. I will be proactive and look at other cases, whether a defense attorney brings these cases or not, of other defendants that these detectives or prosecutors may have touched. And so it's not enough just to take what you get. We've got to get focused and really be proactive in looking backwards at correcting the sins of the past and keeping a list and systematizing this in a fashion that allows us to be proactive and not just receive referrals. Secondly, I believe the DA needs to work with the mayor to make sure that these claims get paid civilly. These persons' lives were taken from them. Many of them were 17 and 19 years old, like George Toka and Earl and Greg, and we need to make sure they get compensated quickly when they come home. And the DA's role should be to work with the mayor and the council to make sure that those settlements get paid and not pay high-priced lawyers to fight them for years in court when they could have given that money to persons wrongfully convicted.
We'll next hear from Judge Arthur Hunter.
Gee, Kia Stewart spent 11 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And I awarded Kia Stewart more than $260,000 based on that wrongful conviction. Now, as a district attorney, what you can do is make sure that you have a conviction integrity unit that will be effective. Because in those cases, the district attorney's office is not involved. Those cases are defended by the attorney general. And I believe that the compensation from those cases are actually paid by the state and not by the city. But if I believe what Jason is talking about, he's talking about other wrongful lawsuits against the DA's office. And so what we can do is make sure as a conviction integrity unit is that we be effective, that we deal with those cases as quickly as we can, and that we cover all the issues as well.
And our final question from our exonerees will be from John Floyd.
My name is John Floyd. I spent 36 years in Angola for a crime I did not commit. He's a licensed district attorney and officer said he would look at the Innocence case, but when he got in office, he fought my case for 9 years. How do I know that the next district attorney will keep their promise?
Thank you, John. First, we'll hear from Judge Arthur Hunter.
Well, John, I can tell you my reputation as a judge for 23 years, the record is there. But let me mention a name to you, Robert Jones. Robert Jones was wrongfully convicted and had been in prison for more than 25 years for a crime he didn't convict. I was the first judge to give him a hearing. And after listening to the evidence in that hearing and the testimony, I gave a bond or set a bond that his family could afford, even though Leon Canizero asked me to set a bond for $2 million. As a result, he was released and the charges were subsequently dismissed. And as I mentioned earlier, Kia Stewart, wrongfully convicted for a crime he didn't convict, spent 11 years in jail, in prison. And I was the first judge, I believe, to award someone compensation for that wrongful conviction. And that was more than $260,000. And again, it was the state was represented by the Attorney General, Landry, and he didn't even bother to appeal the decision. And so you can trust my word. You know, I've made some tough decisions on the bench, controversial decisions, but I wasn't afraid to do the right thing. And I would do the same thing as your next district attorney.
Thank you, Judge Hunter. Next, we'll hear from City Councilman Jason Williams.
Everybody today and for the past few weeks and probably for the next 30 days is talking progressive. But the measure of a man or woman is not what they say at these forums. It's what they've done with their lives and when they had a chance. And what I did was I fought for Greg Bright to come home, and I did that pro bono. I fought for George Toka to come home pro bono. And when Jerome Morgan was freed and Leon Canizero went after the young men who recanted and finally came through to tell the truth, and he tried to prosecute them, I went in and represented them for free as well, because it's not a measure of what you say, it's what you do. And Judge Hunter's a good man, but when he had an opportunity to deal with unanimous juries, he just wasn't moved completely by the Jim Crow era roots of unanimous jury verdicts. And because it's scary to bring that amount of change at a time when a lot of people don't get it and don't understand it. I have spoken truth to power for 20 years. I was the only one who stood up to Leon Canizero with all of his atrocities, not the folks on the bench with a front row seat to all of his atrocities. So I've proven that I'm going to keep my word and be what I am, which is a fighter for people. And it can put a target on your back.
Thank you, City Councilman. Next, we'll have Judge Keva Landrum.
Thank you. And you know, the councilman is right when he says, you know, people are talking but not doing. And so as a councilman, he was directly seated in a position that he could have, in fact, fought to change a lot of these laws that have held us down for so long. And instead of just talking from the dais, you know, why not do it? Because the fact is simply this. I think the gentleman asked, you know, how can he trust our word? And the fact is, you can establish trust by people's actions and not just by a lot of talking. And so the fact is that, you know, I am going to tell the New Orleans community to hold me accountable for what I'm saying. And that is by doing a yearly review, showing our progress, showing what we've done. And if we haven't done it, hold me accountable for what I'm saying. Hold me accountable for our conviction review unit and the integrity that it will build with the New Orleans community. And so that is that's what's important. It is the accountability and holding people accountable so that it's not just talk, it's action. And I am the only one suited in this race to actually bring those changes about.
So there are actually 4 candidates running to become the next district attorney of Orleans Parish. Candidate Morris Reed was not able to join us, and so we have a little bit more time left for some additional questions. And the next question is going to be about public records, and I'm going to ask it. So the public records law ensures transparency of a public agency's policies, procedures, decisions, and actions. The current DA has a practice of refusing to turn over public records in a timely manner, turning over heavily redacted copies or partial or incomplete answers to public records requests. In fact, just this summer, he was handed a $50,000 penalty for failing to provide public records. What do you think the next district attorney could do to make sure that the public has full and open access to public records from your office? And we'll start with Jason Williams.
As a council member, I created, speaking directly to Judge Landrum in terms of talking the talk or walking the walk. As a council member, I created a host of public-facing dashboards. One showing who's arrested, one showing who's in jail, one showing NOPD consent decree compliance, one showing what bail bonds are being set on who, and one showing the racial disparity of the entire criminal justice system. And then this year, one that showed COVID-19 rates of spread. I will do the same thing in the first 100 days in the DA's office, create public-facing dashboards about who's charged, about what cases are diverted, what cases are declined. And this is how you can create real transparency. Not like what Judge Landrum was talking about once a year. I'm talking about publicly putting information and data out 24 hours, 7 days a week, so the public can grade the paper of their DA from the comfort of their home anytime they choose. That is what real transparency looks like. Not just saying, I promise to be transparent, but actually instituting it and designing it in a systemic fashion.
We'll next hear from Judge Keva Landrum.
Thank you. And so it is about being transparent with our New Orleans community. And what that looks like is not just a snapshot in time, like a dashboard. It looks like making sure that in the aggregate, we collect data, that we look at that data, we analyze it, we make policies and procedures that are consistent with that data, and we share it with our New Orleans community. Listen, one day in time doesn't tell us anything. It just tells us what happened on that day. It is important to look at this in the aggregate. And as the Chief Judge of Criminal District Court, it has always and was always my policy to ensure transparency in all of the work that we did. So when it came to public records requests, we worked extremely hard to meet those in a timely fashion, to give over all of the information that was requested. And I would continue to do that as our DA. And what I can tell you is this: the dashboard is only as good as the information that you put in. And more importantly, that dashboard relied on information that came from agencies like the court and the transparency that I implemented as our chief judge. And as our next DA, I stand behind transparency so that we can build a relationship of trust with our New Orleans citizens.
Thank you, Judge. We'll next hear from Judge Arthur Hunter.
Thanks, Gee. Look, I've made numerous decisions telling the assistant district attorneys to turn over information. If they didn't turn over information, I was going to hold them in contempt of court. And look, the answer is simple. We would turn over any information that's required. We're a public agency because we don't believe we're going to have anything to hide, because we're not going to hide evidence. We're not going to issue fake subpoenas. We're going to be fair, and we're going to do the right thing.
Thank you, Judge. Before we give you an opportunity to make a closing statement, kind of summing up your campaign and what you hope to do for the city of New Orleans, I have one final question for all of you. We've talked a lot about conviction integrity, and I want to talk to you about sentencing integrity. If you're elected to be the next Orleans Parish District Attorney, will you revisit excessive sentences, such as individuals serving life sentences as habitual offenders for drug offenses or property crimes? And as you know, New Orleans certainly leads the state of Louisiana with the most excessive sentences under the habitual offender law. If so, how would you incorporate sentencing integrity into your conviction integrity units? And with this question, we'll start with Judge Arthur Hunter.
Thanks, Gee. You must have been talking to Danny Engelberg. That's going to be part of the conviction integrity. We're going to look at those sentences, those habitual offender sentences, because they were usually, a lot of them were used just on people who had nonviolent offenses. And if you look at the history of those people, I guarantee you can find that was a mental health issue or an opioid or drug addiction issue. And so we're going to definitely look at those sentences, especially those sentences around marijuana cases as well.
Jason Williams, you're next.
Gee, my civil rights division will contain the conviction integrity unit, but we will also be reviewing excessive sentences. And this will be a standalone unit within the DA's office. And not only will it just look at reviewing excessive sentences, it is also going to be committed to dealing with non-unanimous convictions. The Supreme Court has addressed it and has not addressed retroactivity. As DA, I believe that my conviction integrity unit should do that proactively until the Supreme Court rules. I think when you look at the amount of time that DAs and judges have given defendants at Tulane and Broad, it would be a sin and a shame not to institutionalize excessive sentences within the DA's office, especially when you look at just the number of young people that have been prosecuted and that would serve very, very long sentences if not left unchecked.
Thank you, Councilman. And your floor is yours, Judge Landrum.
Thank you. And I think initially when I described the conviction review unit and under my administration, I made it clear that not only would it review convictions for integrity, but also for sentences. And so we would also look at the sentences and make sure that those are not excessive. That is going to be part of that conviction review unit. What I can tell you is this: I have a very close friend whose dad over 30 years ago was convicted for heroin and was sentenced to life imprisonment. And she fought for many years for her dad to be released from that sentence. And in all the years that I've known her, her dad has been out, I think now approximately 2.5 years. And so I, from a personal standpoint, understand about excessive sentences and how we need to review those and make sure that those are met with integrity as well. And my conviction review unit will do that.
Great, thank you so much. We will now give you an opportunity to give a summation, a closing, summarizing your campaign and what you hope to do for New Orleans. And we'll start with Judge Arthur Hunter.
Thanks, Jee, and James, and thanks to all the participants who asked those serious questions, and hopefully our answers satisfied you. Look, on November 3rd, we have the opportunity to change how the district attorney's office has operated over the last 50 years. It's done more wrong, it's been unfair, and not enough of the right thing. And simple, you have to, we will have the decision to determine what kind of criminal justice system we want to live under. One that is, fair or unjust, effective or chaotic, right or wrong. And just looking at all of us, because it's really not about us, it's about you. And who you want to select as the leader of the criminal justice system that we live under. And I can tell you, I've been fair as a judge. I can tell you that I've created nationally recognized programs to reduce and prevent crime. I can tell you I've made tough decisions regardless of the political consequences. And I can tell you I'm not afraid to do the right thing. And I would take those same attributes, those same characteristics, that same record that I've been doing for the last 23 years on the bench, and bring that to the district attorney's office and be that kind of district attorney for the city of New Orleans and Orleans Parish.
Thank you, Judge. We will next hear from Councilman Jason Williams.
Today, thank you for this opportunity on this very important day. Let me first start by apologizing to all of the men who lost days and years from their life from a system that was rooted in racism and rooted in unfairness. I am the only candidate in this race that has fought for people's rights in juvenile court, in criminal court, in the Fourth Circuit, and in the Supreme Court. I'm the only candidate that has worked pro bono to exonerate the wrongfully convicted. I'm the only one on this screen who has stood up against Leon Canizaro's abusive policies and practices at Tulane and Broad. I'm the only one who fought against Harry Connick as a lawyer and as a judge in 2003. When I was a judge in 2003, I presided over the case State versus John Thompson, where the DA brought a bogus trumped-up charge against him, saying that John battered a 300-pound deputy in his last days in jail right before he was to be released, so they would not have to deal with him being free. The charges were horrible. I acquitted him in a judge trial, and I am proud that I did that. And I am proud for the fight that I've put up for the past 20 years. I'm the only candidate who has fought and successfully exposed the many Brady violations of the DA's office. And as council president, I fought to decriminalize marijuana so that we could decarcerate the jail at Tulane and Broad. I fought to write legislation and unanimously pass municipal bail reform to get poor people home. I've worked with Vera and MacArthur to write legislation to figure out ways to get us from 7,000 people in jail to 700 people in jail. I'm the only candidate that believes decarceration should be a policy goal of the DA. And when Leon Canizaro was putting rape survivors and domestic abuse survivors in jail, the entire bench at Tulane and Broad remained mum and quiet. I stood up against those atrocities from City Hall. And I will continue to fight for people and fight for fairness as your next DA. Our legal system is implicitly racist. It is implicitly unfair. And just like I fought to take down racist monuments and change street names, we have to reckon with the legacy of the racism and Jim Crow era policies that pervade our criminal legal system. We have to redesign it from top to bottom. And I'm the only one that will do it. And a monument made of bronze or concrete is not nearly as strong of a monument to the racism that has led the first 300 years of the criminal legal system. That is the biggest monument to Jim Crow, our current legal system. And I want to fight to redesign it.
Thank you. And we'll finally hear from Judge Keva Landrum.
Thank you. And thank you to IPNO for sponsoring this today. And thank you all for the thoughtful questions that we've had to answer. You know, I think the thing is this, the focus needs to be the New Orleans community and the citizens here in New Orleans. And so when our focus is shifted toward that, then we can start looking at what we need to do to operate a fair, transparent district attorney's office. And so the fact is simple, that in my career, I have been a prosecutor. And I've worked my way through that office to make sure that I could understand the systems and systematic changes we need to make to the office. I have always stood for what is right and fair for everyone as a prosecutor and have never, ever, ever committed anything that caused any discipline, because what I know and the way that I have also trained prosecutors is that it is not about winning, it is about fairness and justice. And so when you operate an office with that in mind, then we are going to build a relationship of trust with our New Orleans community. And that is the first and primary thing that we need to do. In my experience, both as a DA and as a judge, I'm the only one that can really deliver the reform that we're talking about. Everyone else is sitting on the sidelines discussing what their vision is, but it takes someone who's operated within this office to implement the change that is necessary to move the office forward. And I am the only candidate in this race with that experience. I have spent my career fighting and working for the citizens of New Orleans. I understand that this is a critical time in our city's history where we have some very, very important work to do. And so I am again stepping up to make sure that we meet this challenge, and I have the strength to get it done. And my history and my record proves it, both as a judge and as a DA. And so that is why I'm running for our district attorney's office, because I know how to make the changes that we need to make and also keep our city safe at the same time. Thank you.
I want to thank all the candidates for joining us today. Councilman Williams, Judge Landrum, Judge Harter. As you all know, this is one of the more important local races to take place this fall, and so many of us are carefully following this election, this race. And given New Orleans' pretty sordid history of wrongful convictions, it is important that we have these conversations to figure out who our next DA will be and who will lead us into the 21st century with a more fair and just system. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Also, on behalf of
Thanks,
Innocence
Jee.
Network, I want to also say thank you to IPNO and all the candidates for taking the time out of your busy schedules to do this. We really appreciate it, and have a wonderful rest of your day, and best of luck on November 3rd.
Thank you.